The sound of breaking glass has a way of stopping time. 1 second, I was sitting at the head of my daughter's dining room table, my hand still resting on the neck of the Johnny Walker bottle. The next, shards were raining down around me like jagged snowflakes, whiskey spraying across my shirt, my face, the mashed potatoes Corinne had spent all afternoon perfecting. 3 inches. That's how close Blake came to taking out my eye.
Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments section where you're watching from, so I'll know how far my story has gone.
The glass hit the wall behind me and exploded. I felt the heat of the liquid before I registered what had happened. My ears rang, my heart slammed against my ribs, and for one long, impossible moment, nobody moved. Corinne's fork clattered onto her plate. The grandfather clock in the corner kept ticking, steady, indifferent, like it had seen this kind of thing before. I should have been afraid. Maybe I was. But what I felt most was clarity. This wasn't about whiskey. It never had been.
2 weeks earlier, I'd stood on Corinne's front porch with a suitcase in one hand and a pumpkin pie from the Boise airport in the other, thinking this would be a good Thanksgiving. I was wrong. The first sign came within minutes. Corinne opened the door with that smile, the one she'd perfected since she was 16. Bright, automatic, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. "Dad, you made it!" She hugged me tight, but when she pulled back, I noticed how thin she'd gotten. Her sweater hung loose on her frame. "You look great, honey," I lied. "She looks tired," Blake said from behind her, stepping into the doorway with a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "She's been running herself ragged at that school. I keep telling her she needs to take it easy." Corinne's smile faltered. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You had a migraine yesterday, remember?" He kissed her temple, but his eyes stayed on me. She never listens. It sounded affectionate. It wasn't. The second sign came at dinner that first night. Corinne was telling me about her fourth graders, how one of them had finally learned to read after months of struggling, and her whole face lit up the way it used to when she was little and showed me her report cards. "It was incredible, Dad. You should have seen his face when—" "Should have," Blake corrected, not looking up from his plate. "You're a teacher, babe. Grammar matters." Corinne froze mid-sentence. Her fork hovered in the air. "Right. Should have." She didn't finish the story. Blake reached over and squeezed her hand. "Just trying to help." I wanted to say something, but what? He was technically right. And Corinne was smiling again, that same automatic smile. So I swallowed my words and cut into my chicken. The signs kept coming. Blake jokingly asked if Corinne had gained weight when she reached for seconds. She laughed it off and put the spoon down. He interrupted her whenever she spoke too long, steering the conversation back to himself. His job at the tech startup, his morning runs, his opinions on everything from politics to the best way to roast a turkey. He checked her phone constantly. "Just making sure you didn't miss any text from your mom's side of the family," he'd say, scrolling through her messages before handing it back. But the moment that made my stomach turn came on the third night. We were watching a movie, some thriller Corinne had picked, and she got up to use the bathroom. The second she left the room, Blake reached over, picked up her phone from the coffee table, and slipped it into his pocket. Just like that. Casual. Practiced. I stared at him. He stared back, one eyebrow raised, daring me to say something. I didn't. Not yet. But I knew then, whatever was happening in this house, it wasn't just in my head. and it wasn't going to stop unless someone made it stop.
I tried to talk to her alone on Wednesday morning. Corinne was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something soft under her breath, a habit she'd picked up from her mother. For a moment, standing in the doorway watching her, I saw Diane. The same delicate movements, the same way of tilting her head when she was lost in thought. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, stepping inside. "Want some company?" Her face brightened. "I'd love that." I pulled out a chair at the breakfast nook, the one with the view of their backyard, overgrown hydrangeas, and a bird feeder Corinne had hung herself. We used to do this every morning when she visited me in Boise. Just the two of us. Coffee and conversation. "So," I started carefully, "how are things really going? With work, with—" "Morning!" Blake's voice cut through the room like a blade. He appeared in the doorway wearing shorting shorts and a grin, earbuds dangling around his neck. Sweat glistened on his forehead. "Didn't know we were having a party." He crossed to Corinne and kissed the top of her head, lingering there just long enough to make his point. "What are we talking about?" "Just catching up," I said evenly. "Great. I'll join." He grabbed a mug from the cabinet and poured himself coffee, then leaned against the counter between us, a human barrier. Corinne glanced at me apologetically. The moment was gone. Thursday afternoon, I suggested a walk, just me and Corinne. A loop around the neighborhood, like we used to do when she was in high school and needed to vent about exams or boys or her plans for the future. "I'd love that, Dad," she said, already reaching for her coat. Blake looked up from his laptop. "Actually, babe, didn't you say you had those lesson plans to finish?" Corinne hesitated, her hand still on the coat rack. I was going to do those tonight." "You said this morning they were urgent." His tone was light, conversational, but his eyes weren't. "You've been struggling with time management lately, haven't you, hon?" "Again?" I asked. Blake smiled. "She's been struggling with time management lately. Haven't you, hon?" Corinne's shoulders sagged. "Yeah, I should probably get those done." She didn't look at me when she said it. Friday evening, Corinne's phone buzzed on the dining table while she was in the shower. I saw the name flash across the screen. Paige. Blake saw it too. He picked up the phone, read the message, and his jaw tightened. "Everything okay?" "Just your friend." He set the phone down. "Paige wants to meet for brunch on Saturday." "That sounds nice." "It's not happening." His voice was flat. When Corinne came downstairs, Blake was already typing a response. "Who texted?" "Paige. I told her you're busy this weekend." "Blake, I haven't seen her in months." "You've been exhausted, babe. You need rest, not brunch gossip." He handed her the phone. "I'm just looking out for you." She stared at the screen. For a second, just a second, I thought she might push back. She didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the guest room desk and started writing everything down. Every interruption, every correction, every time he pocketed her phone or spoke for her or steered her away from me. My hand shook as I wrote. I kept thinking about Diane, how she used to apologize for things that weren't her fault, how she learned to make herself smaller to keep the peace, and how I'd watched her fade inch by inch, year by year, until there was almost nothing left. I told myself back then that I was respecting her choices, giving her space. I was wrong. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Not with Corinne. Not again.
The tension at dinner had been building all night. Blake had already finished half the bottle before we even sat down to eat. His words were starting to slur at the edges, his movements looser, meaner. Corinne kept trying to steer the conversation towards safe topics, the weather, the neighbor's new fence, anything bland enough not to trigger him. It didn't work. "This roast is dry," Blake said, pushing his plate away. "You overcook everything." Corinne's fork froze halfway through her mouth. I followed the recipe exactly." "Maybe follow a better recipe." He laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. She set down her fork and didn't pick it up again. I felt my chest tighten. Blake reached for the whiskey bottle in the center of the table, tipping it toward his glass. Only a few drops came out. Empty. He looked at me, his eyes glassy but focused. "Pour me another, Harley." There was a fresh bottle on the counter behind me. I'd seen Corinne pull it out earlier, setting it aside like she knew this moment was coming. I didn't move. "I think you've had enough," I said quietly. The room went still. Blake's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "I said you've had enough." Corinne's hand shot across the table toward mine. "Dad, please, stay out of this." Blake's voice dropped an octave. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on mine. "Blake, I said stay out of it." She flinched. That's when I knew. I wasn't backing down. Not tonight, not ever again. I slid the bottle just out of his reach. "Pour it yourself," I said. For a second, Blake just stared at me. Then his face twisted into something ugly, something I'd only seen glimpses of before. "You arrogant old bastard!" He grabbed his empty glass and hurled it at my head. I ducked. Barely. The glass exploded against the wall behind me, whiskey and shards raining down like shrapnel. Corinne screamed. I stood, my heart hammering, my ears ringing, every muscle in my body coiled tight. Blake rose too, slower, his chair scraping across the floor. His smile returned, colder now, sharper. "Get out," he said softly. "Dad, please." Corinne was crying now, her voice breaking. "Please, just go." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of me leaving, fear of what Blake would do if I stayed. I forced myself to nod. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and walked toward the door, my legs trembling. But before I left, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tiny voice recorder I'd bought at an electronics shop in downtown Portland 2 days ago. I slipped it behind the framed photo of Corinne and Blake on the entryway table, tucked it just out of sight. Blake was already pouring himself another drink, his back to me. I stepped outside into the cold November air and pulled the doors shut behind me. My hands were still shaking, but I smiled. "You just handed me proof," I whispered. The Cascade Motel wasn't much. Peeling wallpaper, a flickering neon sign, and a parking lot that smelled like cigarettes and rain. But it was 3 blocks from Corinne's house, and it had a door that locked. That was all I needed. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, my jacket still on, the recorder clutched in my shaking hands. I'd circled back an hour after leaving, waiting in the shadows until I saw Blake's silhouette move away from the living room window. Then I'd slipped in through the side gate, retrieved the device, and disappeared before anyone noticed. Now, in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I pressed play. Static hissed through the tiny speaker. Then voices. "Don't understand why you always defend him." Blake's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "I'm not defending him, Corinne, quieter, pleading. "He disrespected me in my own house, and you just sat there." "Corinne, he's my father." "I don't care." A thud, something heavy hitting a surface. You know what your problem is, Corinne? You're weak, just like him. Silence. Then the faint sound of crying. Stop! Stop crying! God, you're so dramatic. More silence. Come here. Corinne, I said, come here! Footsteps. The rustle of fabric. Then nothing. I hit pause, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped the recorder. It wasn't explicit. No screaming, no clear threat. But the tone, the control, was suffocating. Any lawyer could argue it away as a marital spat. Any judge might dismiss it as hearsay. But I knew what I'd heard. I knew what it meant. I replayed it 3 more times, each listen tightening the knot in my chest. I thought about Diane, about the nights she'd cried in the bathroom with the door locked, about the excuses she'd made for bruises I pretended not to see, about how I'd done nothing. Not this time. I needed more, something undeniable, something Corinne couldn't explain away or justify or forgive. I opened my laptop and started searching. Domestic abuse resources, legal definitions, how to document coercive control. The screen blurred as I scrolled, my exhaustion catching up with me. That's when my phone buzzed. A voicemail. From Corinne. My heart lurched. I grabbed the phone, hands fumbling as I unlocked it. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. 20 minutes ago. I must have missed the call while I was retrieving the recorder. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. Static. Then her voice, barely above a whisper. Dad, don't... A pause. Breathing. Fast. Uneven. Don't come back. He knows you... A sharp noise. A door slamming? A hand over the phone? Then nothing. The message cut off. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. He knows. How? I'd been so careful. The recorder was tiny, hidden. I'd made sure Blake wasn't looking when I planted it. Unless he'd seen me come back. Unless he'd been watching. I tried calling Corinne. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I thought about driving back there, pounding on the door, demanding to see her. But if Blake knew I was gathering evidence, if he knew I was on to him, what would he do? What was he doing right now? I replayed Corinne's voicemail, straining to hear anything in the background. A shout, a crash, anything. But there was only static, and her voice, fractured and afraid, whispering into the void. Don't come back. I sat there in the dark, the recorder in one hand, the phone in the other, my mind racing through every terrible possibility. I couldn't go back, but I couldn't stay away either.
I returned the next morning with coffee and an apology I didn't mean. Blake answered the door, wearing a clean button-down and that practiced smile, the one he used on neighbors and co-workers and anyone who didn't know what he really was. "Harley," he said my name like we were old friends. "Come in, we were just talking about you." The hair on the back of my neck stood up, but I forced myself to nod. "I wanted to apologize for last night. I was out of line." "You were. But hey, families fight. Water under the bridge." He stepped aside, gesturing me in like he was doing me a favor. Corinne was at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently. She looked up, and for a moment I saw relief flash across her face. Then Blake's hand landed on her shoulder, and it disappeared. "Tell him," Blake said softly. Corinne's gaze dropped to her mug. "Dad, about last night. I waited. I think maybe it wasn't as bad as you remember. My stomach dropped. What? The glass. She wouldn't look at me. Blake says you might have misunderstood. That he was just, setting it down, and it slipped. Corrine, he threw it at my head. No. Blake's voice was calm, patient. I set it down hard. I was frustrated, but I didn't throw anything. You ducked like I did, and I think that scared you. He squeezed Corine's shoulder. Scared both of us, honestly. I stared at him, then at her. You were there. You saw it. She hesitated, her fingers trembling around the mug. I don't remember it being thrown, Dad. Everything happened so fast. Blake leaned down, kissing the top of her head. It's okay, babe. Your dad's getting older. Memory plays tricks. It's normal. My hands clenched into fists. He was erasing it right in front of me, and she was letting him. I think maybe you should go home, Dad. Get some rest. We can talk after Thanksgiving. I didn't leave. Not really. I told them I had an early flight and needed to pack, then retreated to the guest room. But instead of packing, I pulled out the second recorder I'd bought, a backup, and clipped it inside my jacket pocket, the microphone aimed outward. Then I waited. An hour passed. 2. I heard them moving around downstairs. Low voices, the clink of dishes, then footsteps on the stairs. I cracked open the guest room door, just enough to see down the hallway. Blake and Corine stood outside their bedroom. His arm was around her waist, his mouth close to her ear. It's better this way, he murmured. I just feel awful, Corine said, her voice thick. He's my dad. I know, babe, I know. But he's not well. You see that, right? The paranoia, the anger, it's only going to get worse. Maybe we should... Corine. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to look at him. He won't live to see Christmas. My blood froze. Corine pulled back slightly. What? I mean emotionally, babe. The way he's spiraling, he's going to destroy himself. He kissed her forehead. We just have to let him. She nodded slowly, like she was convincing herself. They disappeared into their room. I stood there in the dark hallway, the recorder running in my pocket, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. He won't live to see Christmas.
Lila Nguyen lived 4 houses down, in a yellow Victorian with wind chimes on the porch. I'd met her briefly at a neighborhood barbecue last summer. A nurse in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense smile. She and Corine used to chat over the fence sometimes, back before Blake started finding reasons to keep Corine inside. I knocked just after noon, my coat collar turned up against the drizzle. She opened the door holding a mug of coffee, her expression shifting from polite confusion to something harder when she saw my face. "You're Corine's dad," she said. "Harley." She nodded slowly. "You look like you've had a rough night. Can I talk to you for a minute?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Her living room was warm, cluttered with medical journals and framed photos of grandchildren. She gestured for me to sit, but I stayed standing. "It's about Blake," I said. Her jaw tightened. "I figured. You know something." It wasn't a question. Lila set down her mug and crossed her arms. "I know enough to keep my distance. My daughter doesn't have that luxury." She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "I dated his brother, Cameron, about 8 years ago. Blake was younger then, wilder. Got into bar fights, lots of drinking. Cam used to joke that Blake had 2 modes, charming or cruel, no in between. Did he ever hurt anyone?" Her silence
was answer enough. There was an incident, a girlfriend. I don't remember her name, something like Felicity or Faye. Blake got arrested for assault. She filed a restraining order. My pulse quickened. What happened? Cameron wouldn't talk about it, but the charges disappeared. Sealed records. Blake's family had money back then, enough to make problems go away. She paused. Cameron and I broke up not long after that. He didn't like me asking questions. Do you know where the woman is now, the one who filed the order? Lila shook her head slowly. That's the thing. She never showed up to the hearing. She dropped the case? No. Lila's voice dropped. She vanished, quit her job, left her apartment. No forwarding address, just gone. The room felt colder. Cameron said she probably moved to get away from Blake, start fresh somewhere. Lila looked at me, her eyes hard. But I've been a trauma nurse for 30 years, Harley. I know what it looks like when someone's running scared. I swallowed hard. Do you think Blake... I don't know, she cut me off, and I never wanted to find out. That's why I don't talk to Corrine anymore. Blake made it clear I wasn't welcome. She needs help. I know. But she has to want it, and from what I've seen, he's got her convinced she doesn't. I left Lila's house with a name, Faye or Felicity, and a sick feeling in my gut. A woman who filed a restraining order against Blake. A woman who vanished before she could testify. And my daughter alone in that house with him, believing his lies, defending him, doubting her own memory. He won't live to see Christmas. I didn't know if Blake was talking about me, or if he'd been talking about Corrine.
Mitchell Torres answered on the third ring. Harley. His voice was gravel and cigarettes, exactly like I remembered. It's been, what, 5 years? 6, since Diane's funeral. A pause. Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. She was good people. Mitch and I went back 30 years, back when he was a detective with Portland PD and I was installing security systems for local businesses. We'd crossed paths on a few cases, stayed in touch even after he retired to fish and drink beer on the Columbia River. If anyone could help me, it was him. I need advice, off the record. Always is with you. I heard him shift, a chair creaking. What's going on? I told him everything. The glass, the gaslighting, the sealed record, the woman who vanished. Mitch listened without interrupting. When he finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You still got those recordings? He asked finally. Both of them. Good. Don't lose those. They're not enough for an arrest, but they establish a pattern. He exhaled slowly. This Blake, he's smart. The kind who knows how to work the system. You go to the cops now with what you got, they'll take a report and do nothing. Maybe send a patrol car by for a welfare check. He'll smile, she'll say she's fine, and you'll be the paranoid old man who cried wolf. My stomach sank. So what do I do? You make him slip. Mitch's voice sharpened. Guys like Blake, they're performers. They need an audience to feel powerful, but they also need control. You take that away, they panic. And when they panic, they make mistakes. How? Thanksgiving, Mitch said. You said Corinne's hosting, right? Family gathering? Yeah. Her aunt and uncle are flying in from Sacramento. Blake's parents are driving up from Eugene. Perfect. Witnesses. I heard him tapping something, maybe a pen, maybe. Here's what you do. You show up, you're polite, apologetic even. You play the humble father who overreacted. Make Blake think he won. That'll just embolden him. Exactly. And when he's comfortable, you pull the thread. He paused. You mention the past girlfriend. Casual, like you're making small talk. Blake, didn't you used to date someone named Faye? Wonder what happened to her. You don't accuse, you just wonder. I felt my pulse quicken. He'll deny it. Of course he will. But his parents will react. They were there for the arrest. They paid to make it go away. You'll see it in their faces. The panic, the anger. And Corinne will see it too. What if she doesn't believe me? That's why you record everything again. Phone in your pocket. The whole dinner. His reaction, his parents' reaction. If he threatens you, if he loses control, and he will, you'll have it all documented. Then you take it to a lawyer. File for an emergency protective order on Corinne's behalf. She'll hate me. Maybe. Or maybe you'll save her life. I close my eyes, my throat tight. 2 days, Harley. Thanksgiving's in 2 days. You can do this. Just stay calm. Stay sharp. And whatever you do, don't let him see you coming. I hung up and stared at the calendar on the motel wall. Wednesday, November 27th. Thanksgiving was Thursday. 48 hours. I pulled out the recorder and checked the battery. Full charge. I tested the microphone. Clear audio. Then I opened my suitcase and pulled out the dress shirt I'd packed for dinner. The one Diane had bought me years ago, back when family gatherings still felt safe. I laid it on the bed and smoothed out the wrinkles. 2 days. 2 days to expose him. 2 days to bring my daughter home. I just had to make sure I survived them.
Thanksgiving arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that made everything feel like a bad omen. I stood on Corinne's porch at 5 o'clock sharp, wearing the wire Mitch had dropped off that morning, a tiny microphone clipped inside my shirt collar, and the reading glasses with the hidden camera lens he'd borrowed from a buddy who did private investigation work. Just act natural, he'd said, and whatever happens, don't take them off. I rang the doorbell. Blake answered with a wine glass in hand and that $1 million smile plastered across his face. Harley, right on time. He pulled me into a one-armed hug that felt like a threat. Come in, come in. Everyone's dying to see you. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Voices floated from the dining room. Corinne's Aunt Shelby, her husband Rick, and Blake's parents, Douglas and Miriam, who I only met once at the wedding. Corinne appeared in the hallway, her face carefully neutral. She'd done her makeup to hide the exhaustion, but I could still see it in her eyes. Hi, Dad. She hugged me stiffly. I'm glad you came. Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart. Blake's hand found the small of her back. Possessive. Let's eat before everything gets cold. Dinner started smoothly. Blake played the perfect host, refilling wine glasses, laughing at Douglas's stories about his golf game, complimenting Shelby's cranberry sauce. He barely drank during the first course, nursing a single glass of Merlot while everyone else relaxed into the warmth of the meal. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched whenever I spoke, the way he watched me like a predator tracking prey. Corinne was quiet, picking at her food, smiling when she was supposed to, but never quite present. Miriam noticed. Sweetheart, you've barely eaten. Are you feeling all right? Just tired, Corinne said quickly. Teaching kindergartners before a holiday week is exhausting. Blake squeezed her hand. She works too hard. I keep telling her to take it easy. You should listen to him, Douglas said, raising his glass. Blake's always been good at taking care of people. I felt my stomach turn. Halfway through the main course, Blake refilled his wine glass. Then again. And again. By dessert, his smile had edges. "Harley, you've been awfully quiet tonight. Everything okay?" All eyes turned to me. I set down my fork. "Just thinking." "About what?" I met his gaze. "About family. How important it is to really know the people you trust." Blake's smile froze. "That's a strange thing to say," Miriam said carefully. "Is it?" I turned to her. "I was just wondering. Blake, you dated someone before Kareen, didn't you? Someone named Faye?" The room went silent. Blake's knuckles went white around his wine glass. Douglas cleared his throat. "Harley, I don't think—" "I'm just curious," I continued, keeping my tone light. "Whatever happened to her?" "Dad?" Kareen's voice was a warning. Blake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need more wine." He walked into the kitchen. I waited exactly 10 seconds, then excused myself and followed. Blake was leaning against the counter, gripping the edge so hard his hands shook. The bottle of whiskey sat open beside him. "You think you're clever," he said without turning around. "I don't know what you mean." He spun around, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw tight. "Yes, you do. You think you can come into my house, disrespect me in front of my family, and walk away? Blake, you think you can take my family from me? Another step. Closer now. Too close." His voice dropped to a whisper, venomous and cold. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." The kitchen lights flickered. Everything went black.
The lights came back on 2 seconds later. Blake's face was inches from mine, his breath hot and sour with whiskey, his eyes wild. "You think you're protecting her?" he hissed. "You're just a bitter old man who can't stand that she chose me." "She didn't choose you," I said quietly. "She's trapped." His hand shot out and grabbed my collar, slamming me back against the refrigerator. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. "Blake!" Kareen's voice from the doorway. "Stop!" He didn't stop. His grip tightened, twisting the fabric around my throat. "You want to know about Faye?" His face was inches from mine, spittle flying. "She was weak, just like you, just like everyone who gets in my way." "Let him go!" Kareen was pulling at his arm now, her voice breaking. "Please!" Blake shoved her back with his free hand. She stumbled, catching herself against the counter. That's when I stopped being afraid. I grabbed his wrist and twisted hard, a move Mitch had taught me decades ago, and Blake's grip loosened just enough for me to break free. He came at me again, swinging wildly. His fist caught my jaw, and my head snapped back, stars exploding across my vision. I tasted blood. "Dad!" Kareen screamed. Blake grabbed the whiskey bottle from the counter and raised it over his head. Time slowed. I saw the rage in his eyes, the calculation. He wasn't just angry, he was deciding whether I was worth the risk. Then the front door exploded inward. "Police! Get on the ground!" 3 officers flooded into the kitchen, guns drawn. Behind them, Mitch Torres stood in the doorway, his phone in his hand, his face grim. Blake froze, bottle still raised. "Drop it!" The lead officer shouted. "Now!" For one terrible second, I thought Blake might swing anyway. But then his eyes found the camera in my glasses, the tiny lens glinting in the kitchen light. His face went pale. "You," he started. "Drop the bottle and get on the ground." His hand trembled. Then he set the bottle down slowly and raised his hands. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice suddenly calm, controlled. We were just having a family disagreement. On the ground, hands behind your back. 2 officers moved in, forcing Blake to his knees and cuffing him. He didn't resist. He just kept staring at me, that cold smile returning. "You're making a mistake," he said to the officers. "This man is unstable. Ask my wife. Corrine." He looked at her, his voice softening. Tell them I didn't do anything wrong." She stood frozen against the counter, her face white, her hands shaking. Her voice cracked. Mitch stepped forward holding his phone. "We have video, audio, everything." He handed the phone to the lead officer, who watched the screen, his expression hardening. The officer looked at Blake. "You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his rights, Blake kept his eyes locked on Corrine. "I love you. You know I love you. Don't let him do this to us." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. They hauled Blake to his feet and led him toward the door. He didn't fight, didn't yell, just walked calmly like he was leaving for work. But as they reached the threshold, he stopped and looked back at me one last time. His smile widened. "You haven't seen the last of me, Harley." The officers pushed him forward, and he disappeared into the night. The house fell silent, except for Corrine's quiet sobbing and the sound of distant sirens fading into the rain. I stood there, my jaw throbbing, my hands shaking, wondering if this was over, or if it had just begun.
The police didn't leave until after midnight. They took statements from everyone: me, Corinne, the guests who'd witnessed Blake's outburst in the kitchen. Aunt Shelby was still shaking when she described hearing the shouting. Douglas and Miriam sat stone-faced on the couch, refusing to speak without their lawyer present. Mitch stayed through all of it, his hand on my shoulder whenever an officer asked me to repeat myself. "Take your time," he'd say. "Get it right." By the time the last patrol car pulled away, the house felt like a crime scene. Empty plates still cluttered the dining table. The turkey sat half-carved, cold and forgotten. Shattered glass glittered in the corner where Blake's first thrown glass had landed a week ago, evidence they'd photographed and bagged. Corinne sat curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at nothing. I sat down beside her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "Sweetheart, you have nothing to—" "I should have believed you," her voice broke. "When you said he threw the glass, when you tried to warn me, I should have believed you." I pulled her close, and she collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder the way she used to when she was little and the world felt too big. "It's not your fault," I said, stroking her hair. "None of this is your fault." "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. You loved him. That's not a weakness, Corinne. That's just being human." She cried until she had nothing left, and I held her through all of it. The next morning, Mitch called with news. "Blake's arraignment is Monday," he said. "Assault, battery, domestic intimidation. The DA's taking it seriously because of the recordings. They're also digging into his past. Found the sealed record from the Faye Caldwell case." "Caldwell," I repeated, writing it down. "That was her name." "Yeah. Turns out she didn't just vanish. She relocated through a domestic violence advocacy program. New identity, new city. Blake's family paid her off to drop the charges, but she kept documentation. She's willing to testify now if it helps Corinne's case." My chest tightened with relief. "That's good. That's really good. There's more." Mitch paused. "Blake's drowning in debt.
Gambling, mostly. Online poker, sports betting. He's in for over $100,000. Corinne had no idea. He kept separate accounts, forged her signature on a home equity loan last year. I felt sick. He was bleeding her dry. And she was his exit plan, Mitch said grimly. Guys like Blake, they don't just control, they consume. When there's nothing left, they move on, or worse. I thought about the cruise, the way Blake had talked about me not living to see Christmas, the cold calculation in his eyes. She's safe now, I said, as much to myself as to Mitch. For now, he agreed. But Harley, bail hearings tomorrow. His parents have money. There's a chance he gets out. That afternoon, the story broke. Someone, probably one of the officers or a neighbor, leaked the body cam footage to a local news blog. By evening, it was everywhere. Portland man arrested after attacking father-in-law on Thanksgiving. The video showed Blake being led out in handcuffs, still smiling, still calm. The comments section exploded. People who knew him, co-workers, acquaintances, all sharing their stories of his charm, his temper, his lies. Corinne read them on her phone, tears streaming down her face. I wasn't the only one, she whispered. I wasn't crazy. No, sweetheart, you never were.
The trial took 3 months to start. Blake made bail. His parents mortgaged their house in Eugene to cover it, and spent the time building his defense. His lawyer was expensive, polished, the kind who wore cufflinks and spoke in carefully constructed sentences designed to sound reasonable. Their strategy was simple: paint me as the aggressor, and Corinne as the confused, emotionally manipulated daughter caught in the middle. I sat in the gallery every day of that trial, watching Blake perform. He wore suits that made him look respectable. He kept his posture humble, his expression wounded. When he spoke, his voice trembled with just the right amount of hurt. I loved her, he told the jury during his testimony. I still love her. But her father never accepted me. He saw me as a threat from day one. His lawyer guided him expertly. And the night of Thanksgiving, what happened? Harley had been drinking, Blake said, his voice soft, pained. He became aggressive. I tried to de-escalate, but he kept pushing. When I asked him to leave, he refused. I was terrified he'd hurt Corinne. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. But then the prosecution played the recordings. The first one, from the night I left after the glass was thrown. Blake's voice cold and venomous. You're weak, just like him. Corinne's quiet crying in the background. The second recording, Thanksgiving night. Blake cornering me in the kitchen. You think you can take my family from me? You have no idea what I'm capable of. And finally, the body cam footage. Blake raising the whiskey bottle, me pressed against the refrigerator, blood on my lip, Corinne screaming. The jury watched in silence. Blake's face remained carefully neutral, but I saw his hands clench beneath the table. On the fourth day, Faye Caldwell testified. She was 39 now, her hair shorter than in the old photos, her voice steady but quiet. She told the court about Blake's jealousy, his controlling behavior, the night he put her in the hospital with a fractured cheekbone. He said it was an accident, that I'd tripped, and I believed him, until it happened again. Blake's lawyer objected 3 times, but the judge overruled each one. When Faye finished, she looked directly at Blake. I ran because I was afraid you'd kill me, and I'm here now because I won't let you do to someone else what you did to me. Blake stared at her, his jaw tight, his mask finally cracking. Corinne testified on the 6th day.
I hadn't been sure she'd go through with it. She'd been terrified of Blake, of his parents, of what people would think. But when her name was called, she stood. She walked to the stand in a navy dress, her hands trembling, and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor asked her about the gaslighting, the isolation, the glass. Corinne's voice shook at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger. He made me believe I was remembering things wrong, that I was the problem, that my own father was the enemy. She looked at Blake. But I see it now. I see what you are. Blake leaned forward, his voice a harsh whisper his lawyer couldn't stop. Corinne, don't do this. Mr. Donovan, sit down. Blake sank back into his chair, his facade shattered. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, I watched Blake's face as the forewoman stood. On the charge of assault in the 2nd degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of coercion, guilty. On the charge of domestic violence intimidation, guilty. Blake's shoulders slumped. I didn't smile, didn't celebrate. I just stared at him across that courtroom, calm and steady, until he finally looked away. It was over.
Spring came slowly to Portland that year. By April, the cherry blossoms were blooming along Corinne's street, petals drifting across the sidewalk like snow. The hydrangeas in her backyard had finally been trimmed, and the bird feeder I'd helped her hang was full again, finches and sparrows visiting every morning. Blake was serving 18 months in the Multnomah County Detention Center. The restraining order would extend 5 years beyond his release. The divorce papers had been signed in February. Corinne was free. But freedom, I had learned, didn't erase the past. It just gave you room to breathe while you healed. I'd moved back to Boise after the trial, but I visited every month, sometimes for a weekend, sometimes longer. Tonight, I was staying through the week. "Dinner's almost ready," Corinne called from the kitchen. I sat at the dining table, the same one where everything had shattered, but it felt different now, lighter. The tablecloth was new, pale yellow with embroidered daisies. Fresh flowers sat in the center. The whiskey bottles were gone, replaced by a pitcher of iced tea and a bowl of lemons. Corinne emerged carrying a roasted chicken, her face flushed from the heat of the oven, her smile genuine. "Smells amazing," I said. "Don't get too excited. I'm still learning." She set the platter down and wiped her hands on her apron. "I burned the potatoes a little. I like them crispy." She laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled the room like music. We ate slowly, talking about small things. Her students, my garden back home, the book club she'd joined with Leela from down the street, the pottery class she was taking on Thursdays. She was rebuilding herself, piece by piece. Halfway through the meal, she set down her fork and looked at me. "I've been thinking about that night," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "You don't have to." "I want to." She folded her hands in her lap. "I keep replaying it, wondering how I didn't see it sooner, how I let it get that bad. Corinne. But then I remember something." Her voice steadied. "You saw it, and you didn't give up on me." My throat tightened. "You saved my life, Dad." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You saved your own life, sweetheart. I helped you remember you could." She squeezed my hand, tears slipping down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I'm proud of you," I said. "I'm proud of us." After dinner, we cleared the dishes together, moving around the kitchen in comfortable silence. I washed while she dried, the way we used to, when she was young and still believed the world was safe. When the last plate was put away, Corinne poured us both tea, chamomile, sweet and warm. We sat back at the table, the evening light filtering through the window, soft and golden. Do you ever think about that Thanksgiving? About what would have happened if you hadn't come? I considered the question. Thought about the glass, the recordings, the trial. Thought about Faye Caldwell and the woman she might have been if someone had fought for her the way I fought for Corinne. I think about it every day, I said honestly. She nodded. Me too. We sat in silence, sipping our tea, the clock on the wall ticking steadily. No shouting, no breaking glass, no fear. Just peace. I looked at my daughter, at the strength in her eyes, the color returning to her cheeks, the future opening before her like a door she finally had the courage to walk through, and I realized the last thing I poured that night wasn't whiskey. It was freedom.
So here's my question for you. Was I right to handle it this way? Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done in my position? If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real-life tales, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Because trust me, there's so much more on this channel. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next life story.